All right, I think we can get started. Good afternoon, everyone. So we are starting today with a guest, then Stefan will come to do the regular briefing. But let us start already. Our guest today will be Andrea De Domenico, who is the Office of the Coordination Humanitarian Affair Head of Office in the Occupied Palestinian Territory. So he's joining us virtually, and now we can see him on the screen. So he's joining us from his office in East Jerusalem, and he will brief you on the humanitarian situation in that region. So Andrea, please go ahead with your opening remarks, and then we will take some questions from the floor and from online.
Thank you, Stefania. Thank you for having me. I will just focus on the latest development because I'm sure that many of you have followed for the last month. In Gaza, fighting around Shifa Hospital intensified over the weekend. In Shifa Hospital, critical infrastructure were damaged, including water tanks, oxygen stations, the cardiovascular facility, and the maternity ward. 3 nurses were also reported killed. Many of the people that were in the hospital have fled or tried to flee. Some have remained behind. It's very difficult for us to establish how many are still in the premises. Yesterday, also, the Palestinian Red Crescent Society announced that Al-Quds Hospital in Gaza City was no longer operational due to the damages to the main generator line, which could not be repaired during the conflict and the consequent power outage. In any case, BRCS told us that they have fuel only for 24 hours, and any possibility of looking or finding fuel was almost impossible and very dangerous, given that there were snipers shooting in and around the hospital. 7 ICU patients and 4 babies in incubators could no longer be treated appropriately, and they were trying to evacuate them in coordination with the humanitarian actors on the ground. We know that some of the staff and patients managed to flee in a very dangerous circumstances, as you can imagine, but others remain trapped inside the hospital, fearing to leave or unable to do so for medical reasons. OCHA staff has been monitoring the movement of people and have interviewed several patients and staff that were crossing, the one that could move, and they were all describing a very, very dangerous situation, reaching from the center of the city, Salah ad-Din Road, that is on the east side of the Gaza Strip, that is the corridor unilaterally declared by the Israeli as the way out from the north. Still on healthcare, lives in Gaza are hanging by a thread due to the depleting of fuel and medical supplies. We hear that patients are already dying, and we have been reported few cases. Also, access to water and food has become more and more difficult for those remaining. And we are trying to figure out better how many have remained behind, but it is, of course, a little bit complicated given the inability of our teams to go in the north of the Gaza Strip. Just a reminder, Gaza has been under electricity blackout for over a month now, and for the north, that is also applicable for water, of course. OCHA teams have been observing the movement of 10,000 of people to the south following the calls by Israeli forces to vacate the north. People arrive by foot, primarily, thirsty, exhausted, and often with no concrete idea on where they would be staying. NGOs are supporting, some local NGOs have been supporting those who arrive with water and biscuit and give a little bit of assistance and try to provide them information where they could eventually reach a shelter, although the choices are very limited because shelter capacity is beyond overstretch and conditions are raising serious concern. In terms of truck coming from Egypt, yesterday we reported 76 trucks of food, medicines, health supplies, bottle of water, blankets, tents, and hygiene products. This brings the overall number to around, I think, 980. But the assistance remains far away from what we need. The delivery at night and the arrival of at night of some trucks is also very complicated because it exposes the teams to danger and risk, and we had already a couple of incidents that were very concerning. And actually, instead of a much needed increase of this assistance, we have been informed by the colleagues of UNRWA that due to the lack of fuel, as of tomorrow, the operations of receiving trucks will no longer be possible. Today, we have also mourned our UNRWA colleagues and put our flag at half-mast. As you know, more than 100 colleagues of UNRWA have been killed so far, and this is, of course, a great concern that reached the overall concern of protection of civilians in the Strip. UNRWA guest house in Rafah, south of the Gaza Strip, also sustained significant damage from Israeli forces, naval strikes. UN international staff present in Rafah had left the building just 90 minutes before the strikes. And we have, of course, engaged with the Israeli to understand the circumstances, but 3 different shots were hit in the house, so it seems a little bit problematic in our view. Operational conditions in general are deteriorating by the hour. We have no fuel, no comms, and no guarantee of respecting UN premises, or in any case, notified premises, which is, of course, reducing progressively our ability to operate. Altogether, the humanitarian community, we support the Secretary General call for an immediate humanitarian ceasefire, which of course needs the agreement with all the parties. We request and support the unconditional release of all hostages and the facilitation of aid delivery wherever people are in need. When it comes in of aid entry, we keep on calling parties to unimpeded and continuous access for humanitarian supplies. The restart of private sector is fundamental to make sure that people can access what they need, and aid delivery should be granted in wherever the people are in need. In particular, we call everybody to respect hospitals. IHL specifically protect hospitals and medical personnel. Hospitals must not be made places of warfare. Any military operation around or within hospital must take steps to spare and protect the patients, medical staff, and other civilians. And all feasible precautions must be taken, including the effective warnings, which consider the ability of patients, medical staff, and other civilians to evacuate safely, which is the bigger challenge that we have at the moment, because we have many patients and personnel that refuse to abandon those patients that cannot move. In terms of displacement, I think we stress the importance of that the people should be free to move where they feel safe, although there are not many safe spaces as of today in Gaza, or stay if they cannot not move. And this means that we should be given the ability to provide those people support and assistance. Our colleagues, OCHA colleagues in the field, are trying their best with the limited resources they have to assess people's needs and trying to coordinate the relief, the limited relief that is delivered, limited comparatively speaking, because UNRWA colleagues are doing a fantastic work with UNICEF, WHO, and WFP supporting them, and UNFPA and others, and also NGOs that are really on the front line. Monitoring the movement of these places is an activity that we've been trying to focus on, and we have interviewed few of them. Unfortunately, we have been receiving accounts of several arrests of people that have tried to move from the north to the south, notably, of course, men. We continue also negotiating with humanitarian access with all the relevant stakeholders to advocate for increasing the space for our operations, despite all the odds that I've just described. We call again and again the parties to protect civilians and civilian infrastructure. Today we have presented a flash appeal. It's a 1.2 billion that covers the month of October, November, December. Of course, it's an estimate of the needs based on what we can, what we should deliver, but the constraints, of course, around our ability to deliver are a big obstacle for us. Humanitarian ceasefire, fuel supplies, all of these should be happening now. We are running out of time before really facing a major disaster. Over to you, Stefania.
Yeah, let me now turn to the floor for questions. I will start with Edie Lederer, and then we have several questions in the room.
Thank you very much on behalf of the United Nations Correspondents Association for doing this briefing. We really appreciate it. My name is Edith Lederer from the Associated Press. I have two follow-ups to what you just said and then two questions. The follow-ups are any trucks getting to the north? And secondly, when you said that UNRWA can't receive any trucks starting tomorrow, what happens then with all the trucks crossing from Rafah? And my questions were, Israel talked about initiating these 4-hour humanitarian pauses. Are they actually taking place? And the Israeli government said that they had offered some fuel to Gaza, and it apparently was rejected by Hamas or others. Do you know anything about that? Thank you.
You can go ahead and answer right away.
Okay, thank you, Stefania. So the trucks to the north, we have been able to do some delivery targeted and trying to coordinate with the Israelis. And then we decided also to go to a simple notification, meaning that the Israeli were not keen to coordinate the movements, and notwithstanding that, colleagues of WHO and others took the risk to cross and deliver assistance to Shifa. This was until 5 days ago, when then the situation deteriorated with the arrival of the troops in the very city center, and then the situation became too dangerous for us to move around. And since then, we've not been able to coordinate any operation in the north. The trucks that will arrive starting from tomorrow, we will not simply be able to unload them, because we don't have the fuel for the forklift, and we do not have the fuel for the trucks that are distributing that assistance out to where the people in need are. The 4 hours humanitarian pauses are something that, as I said, it's this corridor that has been unilaterally established by the IDF on the ground, Israeli forces, and it is a way for people to vacate the north in relative safety, because it is not agreed by the parties, is unilaterally declared by Israel. Still offers an opportunity. We had a couple of incidents. There has been, my team was, a few hundred meters from heavy bombardment while monitoring this crossing, so you understand a little bit the landscape. But for sure, it has been used by thousands of people in the last 7 days. At the beginning, very, very prudently, and then increasingly with increased influx. Yesterday, there was a little bit of a fluctuation of the numbers. I think we're 25,000 that has crossed, that we estimate, and we do an estimation based on an observation on 5 minutes. We count people, and we try to estimate and extrapolate what will be the window that have been used and how many people will have crossed in that window. But I do not have yet the data for today. And with regard to the fuel offer to Gaza, I read the same on media. I do not have any specific feedback on that.
So let me go to Benno, then Amélie, then we will keep going.
Thank you so much. It's Benno Schwinghammer with the German press agency. Thank you for this briefing. Israel says that Hamas has a command post under the Shifa Hospital. Do you consider this a credible claim? Also, do you have any confirmed numbers of people who died in the hospital due to the lack of fuel?
So the command post is something that we've seen in social media. I think all of you have seen the same, and we are not in a position to independently verify those informations. In addition, they refer to something that is underground, so really, even for those who have been in the hospital, it was very difficult to be able to assess that. Notwithstanding this, the point we've repeatedly made to the Israelis that there are 5,000. Shifa Hospital was originally conceived to have 650 beds. They expanded at the beginning of the war to 750, and they had at some point they had 5,000 patients on it, plus 60,000 displaced people seeking for safety, which of course you have seen as disappearing these days, considering the approaching of the fighting around the hospital. So our plea has been always the same, to protect hospitals and make. But to all the parties, by the way, I mean the same of course applies to the de facto or armed groups in Gaza, but also to find a viable way to evacuate the patients. Now, the problem is that in Gaza, there were roughly 3,600 beds before the war, 64% based on the north, the area that they want to vacate. So basically, and we have now 27,000 wounded, I think. So, there is simply no options to relocate those patients in safety in any place in Gaza. And so even the request of vacating the premises have not, they are not simply not realistic because there is no place to go. And I do not have the latest information about how many patients. I heard that the first day there were some babies, a couple of babies that passed away after the incubators had been disconnected, and they were pulled out of the oxygen support and the comfort of the heated incubator. And I know there were 43 babies that were originally in incubators, and there were 41 patients under ICU in intensive care unit. So, but I do not have an update considering what happened in the last days in terms of losses of communication with them. Over.
Thank you. Amélie?
Thanks. Amélie Bottelier from AFP News Agency. This morning, the Palestinian Prime Minister asked the UN to parachute aid into Gaza because of the road access being so complicated and some area being not accessible at all. Is it something that would be possible, and are you considering this option? Thank you.
Parachuting is always the last resort in terms, if you ask any logistical colleagues, because it's very, very expensive and not sustainable. The reality is that there are ways to bring in assistance if the parties agree on unimpeded access and continuous access. So I think the first entry point should be insisting in opening the crossings and making sure that sustained supplies goes in, rather than thinking to extreme scenarios. I know that the Jordanian did already a launch with aid through aircraft, but of course, you can imagine the quantities are limited, and as I said, is really, really logistically very, very challenging.
Nabil, and then we'll keep going.
Thank you, Stephanie. Thank you, Mr. De Domenico. It's Pamela Falk from CBS News. The UAE said they were setting up a field hospital, or it was only a few days ago, but for Gaza. Have you seen anything on that? And Israel has claimed and showed pictures of a small amount of fuel that was sent to the hospital for the neonatal unit, that when people tried to get out, as far as social media and other reports, they were shot at. Some were actually killed. Do you know who's preventing people from leaving the hospital to get the fuel? Because Israel delivered it. It wasn't Israel. Thank you.
So with regard to the offer of the UAE field hospitals, there's been a lot of discussions about and requests about establishing field hospitals. The problem of field hospitals, we welcome, of course, the establishment of field hospitals, considering the current situation and the amount of patients and wounded that I've mentioned before. The issue, though, is that a field hospital has to be connected to an existing hospital as much as possible, according to the expert. And in any case, it will take a sustained support and access to facility. Not only the physically the hospital per se, but also the fuel that is required, the staff that is required. And there are, in field hospital, if I'm not mistaken, there is a ratio of 4 people for 1 bed. So if you want to have a decent size hospital, 50, 100 patients, you need 200 to 400 staff. So all that machinery has to be put in place, and at the moment, there are not the conditions to get there. When it comes to the fuel sent to the neonatal, as I told you earlier, I do not have information. We had accounts of I was talking with the colleagues from an hospital the other day, and they were telling me that people, civilians that were trying to reach out for water, has been shot and killed by snipers. Who were those snipers? I cannot. We have no possibility to confirm that. But what I know is that the situation is very dangerous, and again, all the parties should respect civilians and allow this humanitarian operations to happen, as we do in many other countries and in many other operations. But here it seems particularly challenging.
We go to Nabil, and then I think, Kristen, did you have a question also after? So I'll go to you after, and then Stefano.
Thank you. Nabil Abisab, Al Arabi TV station. So, do you have an estimate on how many people have fled from the north to the south? The total number so far. And do you have any plans to establish any form of camps, maybe, to shelter these people in the south or anywhere else? And my second question, can you explain to us, please, like from the field, on the ground, what would a humanitarian ceasefire mean in terms of scale, in terms of duration, access? Does it cover all of Gaza or just parts of Gaza? For how long? If you can explain to us, what does this term mean?
Thank you, Nabil, for your question. So the estimate, as I said, our team have been deployed there since the very beginning of this unilateral declared corridor. We estimate as of yesterday, 230,000 people might have moved to the south. I do not have the data of today. And as I said, they are based on an quite empirical methodology where we stay in a couple of, in 2 slots during the day for 5 minutes, counting people that we see passing by. It is not possible to do more than that because we do not have communication means that are allowing us to systematically organize the counting, and the security is not there. As I said earlier, heavy bombardment was very close to our vehicles. With regard to camps, I think that you're familiar with the context, Nabil, and there are 2 elements. First of all, Gaza is a very narrow piece of land. Taking the entire strip, you have 365 square kilometers with 2.2 million people. Now, if you think that we are moving, the IDF are moving, and the combats are moving, the fighting are moving the people on the south, that means that that space is even reduced. There is all an area around the fence with Israel that is super dangerous because it's very near to the ranges of exchange of fires between the 2 parties. So there is not much remaining as a space to have camps. And in addition, in general, people do not accept the idea to go on tent. There are historical reasons that I don't need to explain you, but there is a natural reluctance to that. Of course, we are thinking about it. Of course, we might be forced to think about it. But first and foremost, what we're trying to do is to accommodate the people where they go and facilitate the access to schools, mosques, wedding halls, and bring them to a status of preparation that they can provide essential relief to people. In terms of humanitarian ceasefire, in an ideal scenario, we should have an agreed ceasefire is with both parties. So no more fighting, with the ability to reach out to people wherever they are, in the north, in the south, in the middle area, and provide life-sustaining assistance. Water, food, medicines as a starting point, and basic, non-food items, we call them mattresses, a blanket. People have lost everything. Those who have left their houses and found refuge in neighborhood, either with friends and families or in this compact, they lost everything. So it's really about offering a window of opportunity. The problem is that we would need a continuous and repetitive series of ceasefire, because the logistical effort to get the machinery to reach 2 million people is gigantic.
Kristen?
Okay, some of my questions were asked and answered, but first of all, for clarity, you said 230,000 you estimate have moved south, but you also said something about 10,000. Is that since the corridors were opened, I think, just to clarify?
So the 230,000 is an estimate based on the 7 days now, because I don't have yet the counting for today. Yesterday was 25,000, for example, but the day before was 50,000. So it's a bit difficult to predict, and I didn't have yet the result today.
Okay, and then you talked about in your initial remarks some of the trucks being exposed and the teams, some of the relief teams being exposed to some concerning incidents. There were some dangers there. Can you elaborate on that a little bit more as well?
So when we did the convoy to the north in Shifa Hospital, when we could still cross the lines, in the middle of the operations, the Israeli alerted us that there were military operation in the neighborhood going to start soon. The problem is that the truck were not unloaded yet. And so we had to rush away. Actually, the trucks remained there, and they were unloaded the following day. And then we had some issues, of course, to bring them back in the south. And in other circumstances, we have had convoys hit by, I don't know who, by someone. And so, of course, this is particularly concerning, because it means that even humanitarian convoys are not safe, even though they are quite visible and identifiable as such.
Stefano, then we have a few questions online, and then I will take a final question from the room and wrap up. So, Stefano, go ahead.
Thank you, Stefano Vaccara, Voce New York. Italy announced last week that was sending a hospital ship close to Gaza coast. Did they have a contact with you, with the UN, and the logistic about this? I mean, when this ship should arrive and how actually will operate? Because so off the coast, will it be possible to transfer patients there and so on?
So we have heard about 3, if not 4, member states that have announced the deployment of ship hospitals in the area. Italians were supposed to come in a couple of days. In our discussions with Israeli, we were asking what are the modalities of evacuation of patients, and the details were not yet teased out. I'm sure that it requires a quite elaborated and detailed agreement of all the parties, because, as I said, as it is for the humanitarian convoys within Gaza, I guess that it will be equally important to make sure that there is a safe and agreed upon mechanism that will allow people to be evacuated into those ships. We do not have, we've not been contacted, and I don't have details of this.
Let me now go online. I'll take two questions online. We have Abdelhamid that is going to be followed by Maggie.
Well, thank you, Mr. Domenico. My name is Abdelhamid Sayam from the Arabic daily Al-Quds Al-Arabi. Sir, the UN officials had been calling on Israel to respect international humanitarian law, not to attack hospitals, to also not to attack UN compounds, not to attack civilians, not to kill children. Yet Israel continued with its genocidal war. And yet I don't hear some serious vocabulary from the UN officials to name things the way they should be named. I don't hear the word war crimes. I don't hear the word genocide. I don't hear the word collective punishment. I only see that they're so soft with Israel. Why is that? I didn't see the same language when Russia attacked Ukraine. I saw bold language. I saw attacks on Russia. I saw calling for immediate ceasefire. I don't see the same language. Why? Can you explain to me that? And I have follow-up questions, please.
Do you want to ask the question and then?
Okay, my second question today, there was memorial for 101 staff of UNRWA. And I didn't see that this memorial ceremony was kind of up to the occasion of seeing 100 staff killed. I was in Baghdad, and when we lost 22 of our colleagues, the UN made so many important occasions to mark the death of 22 colleagues. Here we have 101, and the SG went today, he didn't say anything, and the killer of those staff was not mentioned. So someone killed them. We don't know who. The name Israel was not even mentioned. Why is that again?
Thank you, Abdelhamid. In terms of languages, I think that we have a constant track of records of calling out the parties and the Israeli when necessary, or the armed group when necessary, for what we see within the purview of our mandate. I think that part of the question should be addressed to Stefan and Stefania, and not to me. On the ground, what we do, we constantly engage with the parties, and we have done publicly and privately many efforts to call the respect of the parties to IHL. Those colleagues that you are mentioning are our colleagues. They are my colleagues. I met them, some of them. So don't tell me that I'm not mourning them. And if you think we should do more, I guess that someone else should answer in New York or for what matters as member states, given that they are all employees of 193 member states that we represent here.
Let me go to Maggie, and then we will wrap up with a final question from Linda here in the room. Maggie?
Hey, Andrea, thank you so much for taking the time to brief us. My question, I have a couple of follow-ups. You mentioned the UNRWA guest house in the south that was damaged in the Israeli strikes, and that the staff left just 90 minutes before the strikes. Were they told to leave by Israel? How was it that they had all left so close to when the incident occurred? And second question, as of Thursday, as we understand it from OCHA, all municipal water wells across Gaza were shut down due to the fuel situation. Is that still the case? Are any wells working? And do you have any update on the numbers of people who were evacuated to Egypt for medical care, and the evacuation of any foreign nationals through Rafah? Thank you.
So with regard to the guest house that has been hit, the people were just out because they weren't to work. It was a sheer coincidence that nobody was there. I suspect that the Israeli have capability to see exactly the locations, and I don't know. So it was just pure sheer coincidence. Otherwise, we would be mourning 4 more fatalities on our ranks. I do not have the details of how many wounds have been evacuated so far. We can provide them to Stefan and Stefania. The operation has been agreed between the parties, so between de facto Egyptians and Israeli, to make sure that there is an exit of dual nationals. I know that there was a number, about 8,000 people in the first number of people, and is progressing by the day. Unfortunately, is very much, is not stable. There are days in which we had 300 people crossing, days in which we have 700 people. Sorry, Maggie, I forgot the third question.
Andrea, it was on the water wells,
yeah.
the municipal water wells. Are they all still shut since Thursday?
Yes, water wells, basically fuel is a very, very, very valuable commodity that has disappeared, consumed completely by people with generators that have, they've done now 30 days, more than 30 days without electricity. So there may be some here and there, but the vast majority of the municipal one have been shut down. Along with the sewage pump that is pumping sewage water to the sea, which means that we have overflowing already of sewage water in some areas, which of course is, as you can imagine, a gigantic threat in terms of public health, which is unfortunately the next step, so that we're expecting to be confronted with a big challenge. Colleagues from the hospital were telling me that the only way they survive in the days before Saturday, actually yesterday, when they were forced to shut down everything, was they were sending people out in the city with jerry cans and recover 10, 15 liters of fuel somewhere. But that's it. So there is no fuel at scale that is necessary for many, by the way, because even by Thursday, communication will be completely down, because Paltel, the service provider, has already announced that actually starting from today, some tower will be shutting down, and by Thursday, all their system will be shut down because they will run out of fuel.
Let us wrap up with a question from Linda Fasulo from NPR.
Thank you. My question is about the ceasefire. Has anyone actually agreed to the ceasefire?
To my knowledge, not. And that's why we keep on calling over and over again about the humanitarian ceasefire. Secretary General has been very clear. Martin Griffith has been very clear. We keep on asking this. Humanitarian coordinator Lynn Hastings has repeatedly asked for this. But, at the moment, we don't see that moving forward. I'm sure that there are discussions, but I'm not sure when it will happen.
Andrea, thank you so much for joining us today. As you can see, there were lots of questions. Please come back anytime. Thank you so much, and thank you, everyone. And we will continue with the noon briefing. Stefan will be back, and I think, just right now. So stay put.
Thank you very much.